at childcare and working their way towards us. And we are very encouraged and excited to have Dr. Sachs, Dr. Leonard Sachs, with us this evening. I had the privilege of hearing Dr. Sachs this summer at the Association of Classical Christian Schools conference that several of our team went to. And he was speaking specifically to much of his material that is in one of his books, Boys Adrift, as it relates to how we can respond to young men, for they are different by design, and young women, for they are different when it comes to working with them in the classroom or helping raise them up as a community. And so just thought we have to have Dr. Sachs come speak to our community. He, as I was sharing at one of our other functions, is a MD and a PhD. He wrote Boys Adrift, The Girls on the Edge, The Collapse of Parenting, all of which I've read and now encouraged for others to read also. We were privileged today for he was able to come. He spoke to our upper school students related to social media, video games, etc. But the premise was more about how we spend our time impacts who we become and how we are. And he'll be sharing a little bit about that this evening as he processes some of his evidence-based parenting when it comes to those things. And then he was able to speak to our faculty related to some of his gender differences based on evidence and how we can utilize that in the classroom with our boys and girls. And then we did a little podcast, which you'll get to hear. But we're super excited. He's here to speak to you this evening, and we're so grateful that you took the opportunity to come tonight, and I think you'll be blessed. Tonight for our new families is what we call Trinity U, and part of our partnership with our parents is how can we keep supporting one another, partnering together, and learning together in this marathon of parenting and getting our children through K through 12th and all that we're hoping for as it relates to our kids. And so we're grateful for that. And the hope being, and I appreciate what Dr. Sachs had to say today when he talks about parenting takes courage. And when we speak of our mission as a school, we know that we hope to produce young men and women of virtue, wisdom, purpose, and courage. And that in order to do that, our children need to be surrounded by parents, especially, but adults in their midst that are seeking those things as well and living out of those. So just super grateful you're here tonight, and Dr. Sachs is as well. Let me pray for us, and he can get started. Heavenly Father, we just thank you and praise you. We thank you for the breath that you've given us today. We thank you for all that has occurred today with our regional conference, Dr. Sachs, students, and now for our parents to be blessed by learning from Dr. Sachs. Thank you for the giftings that you've given him and the way that he is using his life to pour into children and to parents. We're just so grateful, and we thank you and praise you, Lord. Amen. Amen. Yay.
Well, I certainly want to thank Mrs. Caddo for giving me this opportunity to meet with the students, to the teachers, and with you. You heard earned my undergraduate degree at MIT. I earned my doctorate in psychology and my medical degree at Penn. I've cut back to part-time, but I'm still seeing patients back in Pennsylvania. Started visiting schools back in 2001. I've now visited more than 500 schools over the last 24 years. I've written 4 books: Why Gender Matters, Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, and The Collapse of Parenting. And I prepared a handout for you. I'm going to be citing a lot of studies. I'm going to be making a lot of recommendations. Links to the studies as well as all the recommendations are in your handout. You don't need it now. I would encourage you not to pull it up now. It's not intended for a phone. It's intended for a laptop or larger screen. It's many pages. But I just wanted you to know there is a handout so you don't feel that you need to be taking notes. The point of the handout is to save you the trouble of taking notes. And I'll show you this link again at the end. But I want to begin tonight with what I believe is the central paradox of American parenting right now, which is that American parents are investing more time and more money in their kids than parents have ever done. And the outcomes are worse than they have ever been. American kids are more anxious and depressed than any generation of kids before them, and they're in worse shape physically than they have ever been, than American kids, and more fragile than kids have ever been. And I document this at great length in my book, The Collapse of Parenting. What is driving that paradox? Tonight we're going to address three factors. American popular culture has changed. It has transformed into a toxic culture of disrespect, breaking bonds across generations, social media and video games, and the collapse of American parenting. And this evening I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by those three factors. Let's start with the culture of disrespect. Begins with the Disney Channel. So this Disney Channel show, Dog with the Blog, the father, supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about what kids want or what kids need. The talking dog is always wiser and more insightful than the idiot dad. This Disney Channel show, Liv and Maddie, the two girls are as different as they can be. The one thing they agree on is that their mother, also supposedly a psychologist, knows nothing about the behavior or motivation of teenagers. The two girls roll their eyes in disbelief at the ridiculous, clueless, out-of-touch suggestions made by their dopey mom. So I'm a family doctor. A mom in my own practice said to me, I don't understand my 8-year-old son, the words that come out of his mouth. The defiance, the disrespect. Where is he getting this? His father never speaks like this. I never speak like this. I said, does he watch Disney, Nickelodeon, Nick Jr.? And she said, well, of course. I said, lock it down. I'm not saying all television is bad. Home and garden television, nothing wrong with that. But no more Disney, no more Nickelodeon, no more Nick Jr. And 3 weeks later, she called me. She said, it stopped. It stopped. He was learning this from the Disney Channel. The Disney Channel is a major vector of what I have come to call the culture of disrespect. The Disney Channel teaches kids that it is cute and funny to be disrespectful to one another, to be disrespectful to parents. So it may begin with the Disney Channel, but it certainly doesn't end with the Disney Channel. It continues to popular YouTube videos, TikTok, and the most popular songs on the Billboard Hot 100. So Lil Nas X had enormous success with his song, Old Town Road. 12 weeks at #1, the most popular song in the United States. And I met with the upper school kids here earlier today, and I asked for a show of hands. The great majority of the kids at this school know this song. And I'm not criticizing them. I mean, this was the most popular song in the United States. All the kids, any kid who speaks English knows this song. Hugely popular. 12 weeks at #1 in the United States, in which he sings, can't nobody tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. So last year, Bill Maher had a big bestseller with this book, in which he observed that a basic truth of human experience is that young people are beautiful but stupid. Old people are ugly but more likely to be wise. So he said that any successful human culture will create strong bonds across generations so that the beautiful young people can learn from the wise old people. Can't nobody tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. That's the culture of disrespect in a nutshell. Can nobody tell me nothing? Well, if you can't tell me nothing, why go to school? Why go to church? The culture of disrespect breaks the bonds across generations. You can't tell me nothing. If you can't tell me nothing, why should I hang out with you? And indeed, American kids don't hang out with grown-ups or people of the grown-ups generation anymore. They did, as recently as 30 years ago, and Dr. Robert Putnam at Harvard and his team has documented this at great length, but they no longer do. This brings us to Drake. Drake is, by any objective measure, the most popular artist in the United States now, and indeed at any time in history. Looking around this room, I see many elderly people. By elderly, I mean people over 30. People over 30 tend to think that Taylor Swift is the most popular artist. She is not by any objective measure. Drake has more #1 hits, more top 10 hits, and many more hits on the Billboard Hot 100 than Taylor Swift has. So, as I said, the opening chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Culture of Disrespect. And no one illustrates the culture of disrespect better than Drake. To understand his lyrics, you need to know that his signature move is the upraised middle finger. This is how he greets his fans, it's how he greets his friends. And you need to know this in order to understand his lyrics, which are relentlessly profane and obscene, full of the F word, the N word. Let's look at one of his #1 hit songs, which again are full of the F word, the N word. So how does our mainstream media respond to the fact that our most successful artist is relentlessly profane and obscene? Well, the New York Times praised this particular song for its lyrical vividness. Look, I'm not picking on Drake. I could just as well have mentioned Justin Bieber or Eminem, who also do the upraised middle finger and the F word. But they're just not that successful compared to Drake. Justin Bieber and Eminem are much less successful. So I was speaking at a Catholic school, and during Q&A, a father was quite annoyed and said, look, I'm a conservative Roman Catholic. I didn't come here this evening expecting to see those words. I really don't think that was necessary, and I am offended. And talking with him, I said, look, have you deployed a parental monitoring app that limits, it turns out he has a 12-year-old son, that limits what your 12-year-old son can see on YouTube? Okay, you don't. He's already seen the video, and I can tell you the video is much more offensive than the lyrics on the screen. I guarantee you, if you don't believe me, try watching it. It was the #1 most popular trending video on YouTube. He's already seen the video. You need to understand the culture in which your son lives. If he speaks English and he has a device with internet access, he's seen the video. You need to understand the culture in which your son is living. Now, I'm not saying American popular culture is utterly depraved. It is not. It's like a big city. There's a lot of great things going on. But there's also a lot of bad things going on. Like, there are high-crime neighborhoods. You wouldn't let your kid wander alone in a high-crime neighborhood without some protection. And as it happens, the worst parts of American popular culture are now the most popular parts. The most popular hit songs, the most popular YouTube videos, the most popular TikTok videos and Instagram are the vectors of the culture of disrespect. You must install a parental monitoring app to limit exposure to the most popular, toxic elements of contemporary American culture, which are now the most popular elements of American culture. And we'll talk more about parental monitoring apps this evening. So I have asserted that American popular culture has changed. Well, what's the evidence for that? Is that just some old guy being grumpy? Well, we have good research on this. Researchers at UCLA studied the most popular TV shows targeting kids from 1967 on, every 10 years, and quantified them on 16 parameters. What is the show teaching? What's important? Most popular TV show in 1967, The Andy Griffith Show, 1977, Happy Days, 1987, Family Ties, 1997, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, those are very different shows, but the researchers found that the #1 most important thing that the show was teaching throughout that era was that the most important thing is to do the right thing, to tell the truth, to be a good friend even if it hurts. Being wealthy, being famous was 13, 14, or 15 out of 16 from 1967 through 1997. But then in just 10 years' time, between 1997 and 2007, they found that the culture flipped upside down. And in 2007, on the most popular shows, like American Idol and Survivor, suddenly the most popular, the most important thing, the #1 most important thing is winning and being famous, #1. Doing the right thing dropped from #1 to #13 on shows like American Idol and Survivor, the most popular shows. Doing the right thing, that's going to get you voted off the island. And the researchers wondered, well, this new cult of fame is immensely toxic, because if you buy into that and you're not famous, you will come to see yourself as a loser, as a failure. So I wrote a book called Boys Adrift, The subtitle is The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men. This is not the Boys Adrift talk, so this evening we're just going to focus on one of those 5 factors, namely video games. Researchers find that boys and girls tend to play different video games, and they play them differently. So Candy Crush and Homescapes are big with girls. When researchers look to see who has spent more than 3 hours in the past week playing games like Candy Crush and Homescapes, they find that girls outnumber boys. Most popular video games for American boys are games like Minecraft, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Fortnite, and RDR2. Average girl playing Candy Crush or Homescapes typically spends about 20 minutes in a session. The average boy playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto typically spends about 2.5 hours in a session. So I was meeting with students at another high school and referred to research specifically on Call of Duty, and I referred to Call of Duty as a video game. And a boy raised his hand, and I called on him, and he said, "Excuse me," he said, "Call of Duty is not a game, it is a lifestyle." And he jumped up and pulled open his shirt to reveal his Call of Duty t-shirt. Another boy jumped up and pulled up his trousers to reveal his Call of Duty socks. Another boy stood up and began unbuttoning his trousers. He wanted to show us his Call of Duty underwear, but he was restrained. I've never had a girl make a similar comment about Candy Crush, although I did see a girl wearing Candy Crush leggings. What is the relationship between time spent playing video games and academic achievement? Well, researchers find no relationship below a threshold of about 6 hours a week. Beyond that threshold of 6 hours a week, there is a linear and negative relationship. A kid who spends 10 hours a week does less well than a kid who spends 5 hours a week. A kid who spends 20 hours a week does much less well. And I spoke to Craig Anderson, the lead investigator on that research, and I asked him, why is that? And he answered with one word. He said, displacement. Displacement. What does Craig Anderson mean by displacement? He means that if you're spending 20 hours playing video games, that's 20 hours you're not doing something else, like studying or sleeping. The average American boy now spends almost 10 hours a week playing video games, compared to about 90 minutes a week for the average girl. So these guidelines, which I shared with the students earlier today, based in the research, no more than 40 minutes a night on school nights, no more than an hour a day on weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. So if you go 3 weeks without playing video games, that does not mean that you're allowed to spend 7 hours on a Saturday playing video games. That is binge gaming, and it is harmful. No video games until all the chores are done and all the homework is done, and no video game console in the bedroom. Scholars defined a violent game as a game in which you must kill in order to win. And they did a remarkable study. They recruited more than 3,000 kids at 12 years of age and gathered every kind of information, demographic you can, race, ethnicity, household income, family composition, parental involvement. And they also did a comprehensive psychological assessment to determine for each one of these kids, to what extent is this particular kid altruistic or selfish, honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, gentle or hostile. So the way to conceptualize this study is to imagine you've got 2 identical boys. And by identical, I mean they're the same race, ethnicity, household income, family composition, parental involvement. And both these boys score the same on this psychological assessment: altruistic, selfish, honest, dishonest, patient, impatient. And both these boys spend 20 hours a week playing video games. The only difference is that one of these boys, his parents will not allow him to play violent games, so he's playing mostly sports games: Madden, NFL football, NBA basketball, FIFA soccer. The boy next door, he's in his bedroom with the door closed, headset on. Parents have no idea what games he's playing, so he's playing the most popular games for American boys, which are violent games: Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. At enrollment, these boys are identical on all these psychological parameters. But over 3 years, the boy playing the violent game changes. He becomes more selfish, less honest, less patient. And after 3 years, the difference is pretty big. So let me tell you one of the clever things the researchers do. At enrollment at age 12, the researchers say, all right, we're all done, thank you very much. Exit that door, make a left turn, go out, find your parents, goodbye. Boy goes out in the hallway. There's a $20 bill on the floor. At age 12, most of the kids pick up the $20 bill, walk it back in the technician, and say, hey, somebody just dropped a $20 bill in the hallway. I'm sure they'll be looking for it. Would you please turn it in lost and found? Fast forward 3 years. Kids are now 15 years old. You bring them back in to repeat the comprehensive psychological assessment to see if they changed. Once again, the technician says, all right, we're all done. Thank you very much. Exit this door, make a left turn, go out, find your parents. Boy goes out in the hallway. Once again, there's a $20 bill on the floor. The boy who's been playing the sports games picks up the $20 bill, brings it back in the technician, says, hey, somebody just dropped a $20 bill in the hallway. Would you please, you know, it's the funniest thing. Same thing happened here 3 years ago. It's like somebody here is just sprinkling $20 bills around. The boy who's been playing violent games, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, goes out in the hallway, sees the $20 bill, looks both ways, there's nobody there. Bends over, picks it up, stuffs it in his pocket, leaves the building. But when you said to him just a few minutes earlier, you asked him, have you changed at all as a result of playing these games? Have you become any more likely to take something that doesn't belong to you? He said, no, I certainly haven't changed. Certainly haven't changed as a result of playing these games. I know it's just a game. I'm not going to go and shoot anybody. He has no awareness of how much he has changed. And the researchers wonder, why is that? Why does the boy have no awareness? And they answer their question. And the answer they give is that we judge ourselves relative to our nearest neighbor. We lead our moral lives relative to our nearest neighbor. Turns out that boys who are spending 20 hours a week playing violent video games are hanging out with other boys who spend 20 hours a week playing violent video games. They're all changing, but they're not changing relative to one another. So this boy is absolutely convinced he has not changed. He has no awareness of how much he has, in fact, changed. Some violent games are worse than others. The worst violent games, the games that push this change from honest to dishonest, from patient to impatient, from altruistic to selfish, the worst violent games are games which employ what the researchers call a moral inversion, a game in which good is bad and bad is good. So one example of a game with a moral inversion is Grand Theft Auto. In Grand Theft Auto, in order to accomplish your mission, you will have to acquire money and weapons. And you can get the best weapons by killing police officers. So in the context of the game, it'd be a great idea to sneak up on some police officers and kill them before they know what you're up to, and that way you get their weapons. That's the only way you can get their weapons. You have to kill them. Now in the real world, to sneak up on police officers and kill them just because they're police officers would be wrong, would be evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. That's what's meant by a moral inversion. If you want to play GTA 5 with a ready-made avatar, you must play as a man. There are no female avatars ready-made. There are women in the game. Many of them are prostitutes. If you get wounded in your firefight with the police officers, you can restore your sex to 100% by having sex with a prostitute. You go up to her, she tells you how much, you give her that money, and then you have sex with her, meaning you watch your avatar flopping on top of her. But you need money in order to complete your mission. You don't have to do this, but it would be a good thing to do in the context of the game, then to take out your knife, you want to conserve your ammunition, and kill her. And that's how you get your money back. That's the only way you can get your money back. You have to kill her. Now in the real world, to kill a prostitute to get your money back would be insane, would be evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. This is what researchers mean by a moral inversion. And with this game launched, it was the most popular game in the United States. Lawmakers in Sacramento were horrified. They flew Anderson and Gentile to Sacramento and heard their testimony and said, look, based on your research, this is exactly the kind of game that is going to change personality, that is going to cause kids to become more selfish, less patient, less honest. And they wrote a law. The California statute made it a civil offense to sell not any violent game, the worst violent games, games like Grand Theft Auto, to a minor child under 18. Basically, it put these games in the same category as cigarettes, put them behind the counter. You'd have to show ID, prove that you're at least 18 years of age in order to purchase the most violent video games. The video game industry immediately brought suit, claiming that the California statute violated their First Amendment right of free speech. And the video game lawsuit went to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the video game industry, rendering the California statute null and void. Justice Samuel Alito wrote a concurrence. Justice Alito said, look, I have read the research of Anderson and Gentile. I read that study, those studies. And I share the concerns of California lawmakers and California parents. These games are heinous. That's the word he used. He said, no child, no teenager should be playing a game where you get rewarded for killing unarmed civilians. But he continued, nevertheless, it is the ruling of this court that deciding what games children will play is not the job of the California State Assembly. It is the job of the parent. And I have included a link to the full text. Oh my goodness, that's the wrong link. It's trinity.pdf. I'm speaking tomorrow at Arma Day. That's my excuse. It's not a very good excuse, but it's trinity.pdf, not armaday.pdf. No excuse for that, trinity.pdf. But there is a link, I assure you, in your handout to the full text of Justice Alito's concurrence, trinity.pdf, not armaday.pdf. A link to the full text of Justice Alito's concurrence, because you need to understand that this is your job. There can be no law limiting what games are sold to children, no matter how violent the game, no matter how young the child, because the Supreme Court has so ruled. You must limit, govern, and guide what games your child is playing. It's your job, if your son's going over to a friend's house, to call the friend's parents and say, hey, will there be a grown-up around to make sure that the boys are not playing a game like Grand Theft Auto? And if the other parent says, hey, the boys go in the bedroom, put on their headsets, I'm not going to waste my time chaperoning what games the boys are playing, then you must say to your son, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to go to that house. There's a lot at stake, it matters, and nobody else can do this job. You have to know the name of the game. Fortunately, that's all you have to know. You go to commonsensemedia.org, a California-based nonprofit, and you type in the name of the game. That's all you have to do. Type in the name of the game, type in Grand Theft Auto, and it'll say absolutely not. No child, no teenager, and maybe no adult either. This game is really twisted. It is reliable. You can trust the assessments. There's no industry influence. So researchers find that violent video games is more of a boys' issue than a girls' issue. When they look to see who is spending more than 20 hours a week playing violent video games, they find that boys outnumber girls by more than 8 to 1. Social media is more of a girls' issue that I address in my book, Girls on the Edge. To understand why it's more of a girls' issue, I want you to imagine a girl living in ancient times. By ancient times, I mean 2005, 20 years ago. It's the evening. She's writing in her diary, by which I mean she's writing with a pen in a bound volume of blank pages. She's writing about who she likes, who she doesn't like, the girl she most admires, the woman she hopes to become. She might write 5 pages in an evening. She's not going to show that to anybody. If she's a younger brother, she might keep it under lock and key. But she's doing very important work. She's figuring out, who am I? Who do I want to become, and what do I really want? The great American psychologist, Dr. Abraham Maslow, said that figuring out what you really want is not trivial. He believed that many adults were miserable because they're working hard at jobs they hate in pursuit of goals that are no longer meaningful to them. So this girl writing 5 pages about what do I really want, she's doing important work. Fast forward to today. When I meet with high school students, I'll sometimes ask them, who here is on Instagram? All the hands go up. Who's on TikTok? All the hands go up. Who's on Facebook? A few hands go up. Who here has a diary? In a room of 300 kids, 4 hands go up. Who's posted anything on social media in the last week? All hands go up. How about the last 24 hours? Most of the hands go up. Who's written in their diary in the last week? No hands. The social media have crowded out the diary. Kids are busy. There's not enough time in the day for both. And social media matters more. So then I'll ask the kids, what's the difference between posting on Instagram and writing in your diary? And a girl raises her hand. I call on her. She says, the diary is private. Instagram is public. Yeah, bingo, exactly right. When researchers look to see how American kids are using social media, they don't find any 5-page essays about what I really want out of life. They find photos. And this is true for girls, this is true for boys. Mike Stefano asked, who posts more? Girls post more, 5 times more. And the photos are different. A boy and a girl both go to a football game, and they both take pictures at the game. But the boy is taking a picture of the game, or the pretty cheerleader at the game. The girl's turning the phone on herself, and she's taking 100 selfies at the game. And then that evening, she's going through the 100 selfies, and she's finding 2 or 3 where she's laughing and the kids around her are laughing, and that's what she posts on her Instagram. Here I am at the game. We had a great time. The difference between writing in your diary and posting on Instagram is the difference between living and performing. The diary is about living. It's about figuring out who you are and who you want to be. Social media, as used by American teens, is a performance. There's nothing wrong with a performance. A performance is a show that you put on to entertain or amuse other people, and nothing necessarily wrong with that. As long as you understand that the performance has to come to an end, and you take off your mask and resume your real life. My concern listening to girls is that many of them are trapped in what I've come to call the cyber bubble of 24/7 texting and social media, and the performance never ends and the mask never comes off. And it is exhausting and it is draining. These kids are hyper-connected to other girls their own age, but disconnected from themselves. So we now have many longitudinal cohort studies showing that the more time a kid spends on social media like Instagram and TikTok, the more likely that kid is to become depressed. So here's one of these longitudinal cohort studies, Instagram, showing the more time kids spend on Instagram looking at other kids' Instagram or looking to see how many likes they got on their own Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed. And this is true for boys, but it's a much bigger effect for girls. And Instagram knows it. Instagram, owned by Facebook/Meta, has an army of data analysts who are watching you. If you spend much time on Instagram, Instagram knows all about you. It knows if you're black or white, affluent or low income, California or Texas, happy or sad. And the data analysts found that the more time girls spend on Instagram, the more likely they are to become anxious and depressed, and that effect is consistent across all groups of girls. Doesn't matter if you're black or white, affluent or low income, California or Texas. One of those data analysts named Frances Haugen downloaded dozens of those studies onto a flash drive, quit her job, and gave a copy of the flash drive to the Wall Street Journal, which published it. And a link to the Wall Street Journal report is in your handout. You do not have to be a subscriber. It's a free link. So I met with Kathy Charles at her office at Napier University. She did a similar study. And she also found that the more time a girl spends on social media, the more likely that girl is to become anxious or depressed. But in her study, it was a huge effect for girls and a very small effect for boys, and she didn't know why. She couldn't explain the girl-boy difference in her own work. And so she was very interested when I shared with her work done by Carol Dweck and her colleagues at Stanford, showing that girls are very ready to believe that other girls are having more fun than they are. Girls are very ready to believe that other girls' lives are more interesting than their own life is. This turns out to be not at all true for boys. Turns out that boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to other people. And girls use social media differently than boys do. So Vanessa gets a puppy, and it's a really cute puppy, and she takes 200 pictures of her cute puppy and posts a dozen of the cutest pictures on her Instagram. But I got some very sad news. Vanessa's puppy got loose, ran out into the street, got run over by a truck. The dog is dead. But she does not post a photo of the dead dog on her Instagram. Boys do. It would not be unusual for a boy to post a photo of the mangled corpse on his Instagram. A boy and a girl both get sick. They both throw up. The boy posts a photo of his own vomit on his Instagram. Girls never do that. So now imagine a girl, 12, 14, 16 years of age, sitting in her bedroom alone, looking at all the other girls' Instagram. There's Emily at the football game. She's having a great time. There's Madison at the party. She's having a blast. There's Vanessa with her new puppy, and it's cute. I'm just sitting there not doing anything. My life sucks. The more time a girl spends on social media, the more likely that girl is to become anxious and or depressed. That's a much bigger effect for girls than it is for boys, and you now understand 3 factors that drive that difference between girls and boys. First of all, girls are more invested in their posts. If you don't like Jake's photo of the pretty cheerleader, she doesn't care. He doesn't care. But if you don't like Emily's photo of Emily, she's going to take it more personally. This boy looking at Jake's vomit or Brett's dead dog is unlikely to want to be Jake or Brett, but girls post a much narrower range of their lived experience, mostly just the fun stuff and the happy stuff. And boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to begin with. So boys are, to a considerable degree, protected from the most toxic effects of social media. Boys are much more vulnerable to the addictive properties of video games and pornography. So what are you supposed to do about it? Well, first you have to recognize that most 14-year-olds are not masters of time management. In one study, they asked this 14-year-old girl, how much time were you on Instagram last night? She said, 40 minutes. It was actually more than 2 hours. But I don't think she was lying. I think she lost track of time. She was having a good time. You have to be the parent. You must install parental monitoring software on any device with internet access and explain to the kid this is your job as their parents. Well, how much time on social media is okay? So again, my brand is evidence-based. When I make a recommendation, I will provide you a study or studies that supports that recommendation. Jean Twenge is our nation's leading researcher on this topic. She and her colleague Keith Campbell did a big study in 2019, 220,000 adolescents. On the x-axis was time spent on social media. On the y-axis was the risk of becoming anxious or depressed. There's no rise in that trend line until 30 minutes, after which there was a pretty linear rise. So 2019, 2020, 2021, I was telling parents up to 30 minutes a day on social media is okay. But that study was published in 2019, based on data gathered in 2018. That's before TikTok. TikTok changed everything. So in 2022, I published this article sharing the new research on TikTok. So researchers who study social media divide social media into 3 generations. First generation social media is Facebook. On Facebook, you can connect with your classmate from first grade, connect with people you know. Second generation social media would be Instagram. On Instagram, you connect not only with people you know, but also with celebrities and influencers. TikTok is completely different. It's third generation. When you sign up for TikTok, TikTok begins by asking you questions. TikTok says, tell me what kind of videos you like to watch. Let me ask you a few questions about what kind of videos you like to watch. Okay, now I'm going to start showing you some videos. And the algorithm is watching you and customizing and refining, looking to see which videos did you watch all the way through, which video did you watch again, which video did you not watch all the way through. You notice that your For You page on TikTok has been a little bit too accurate lately? The things it's showing me, it's not showing me things that I Googled about or talked about. It's the thoughts in my head. Thoughts in my head. TikTok knew I was gay before I did. TikTok knew I was trans before I did. So researchers reached out to TikTok and said, look, the algorithm is really toxic. It is pulling girls down into a rabbit hole that valorizes anorexia and self-harm. You got to change the algorithm. And TikTok said, okay, thank you very much. We'll change the algorithm. And then 3 years later, the researchers said, you didn't make it better. You made it worse. And that encounter between the researchers and TikTok is documented in this Wall Street Journal article titled, TikTok Feeds Teens a Diet of Darkness. Again, there's a link in your handout. It is a free link. You don't need to be a subscriber. So kids are supposed to be 13 years of age to sign up for social media. Where does that rule come from? It comes from a law called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. But the Surgeon General determined 2 years ago that 40% of American kids 8 to 12 years of age are on social media. Because any kid can lie and say they're 13 years old. There's no enforcement. There's no checking. You just say how old you are, and boom, you're on. You don't need parents' consent. There's no checking. It was enacted in 1998. Okay, Facebook came on board in 2004. This is prehistoric. So 2 years ago, the Surgeon General said, all right, we need a new law. Because first of all, no 13-year-old should be on social media, and secondly, there's no enforcement. Any 10-year-old can say they're 13 and they're on. We have the technology. We can easily do this. We can put teeth in a law, and 13 is too early. So I have on a number of occasions emailed Jean Twenge, our nation's leading researcher on this topic, and I emailed her and I said, look, your article with Keith Campbell is out of date. The newer research shows there's no safe amount of time. The rise starts at 0 time, not at 30 minutes. And she responded. She said, the evidence now provides support for a total ban on social media for all children under 18 years of age. I said, can I quote you? She said, yes, you can quote me. So last year, John Haidt came out with his book, and he says there's good arguments for waiting till 18. I think 16 is the right minimum age to be established by law. We can argue about 16 versus 18, but all the scholars agree no child under 16 should be on social media. You certainly need to follow that rule. I recommend 18. John Haidt says 16. We're going to talk more about John Haidt in just a moment. I think 18 is the right age. John Haidt says 16. Jean Twenge says 18. So John Haidt was kind enough to send me an advanced reading copy of his book 6 months before publication. And I emailed him back. I said, you know, it's a great book and everything, but to be blunt, it's all theory, no practice. You give parents no guidance about how to do anything, to enforce any of the recommendations you make. You never mention parental monitoring apps. You never mention them, which are essential if parents are going to keep their kids off social media. You talk about how terrible social media is, but you don't tell parents how to do it. And he said, yeah, you know, the whole parenting thing, that's just not my lane. You must install a parental monitoring app like Canopy, NetNanny, Barker, Custodio. Jean Twenge has a new book out, just came out last month. It fills the gap. It provides all the stuff that John Haidt's book does not provide. I highly recommend it. It's called 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. Of course, it's in your handout. This is the book we need. Can't recommend it highly enough. She walks you through how to install a parental monitoring app. Because parents will say, oh, my kid will just uninstall it, do whatever he wants, and then reinstall it. No, he can't. Not if you know what you're doing. She will show you how to do it. If you're not sure how to do this, you need this book. And again, parents are skeptical. They'll just say, oh, come on, my daughter's just going to Google, how do I get around parental controls on NetNanny? Well, I actually spoke in NetNanny. And they told me they have colleagues whose full-time job is to Google the phrase, how to get around parental controls on NetNanny. And that if a kid has found a hole, they patch it, usually within hours, and the app will update. These apps work. I found that when parents say that, they're saying this is an excuse because they don't want to do it. They don't have the courage. I want you to know I practice what I preach. I have had the great privilege of speaking at JSerra Catholic High School in San Juan Capistrano, Orange County, on 10 occasions since 2017, in person. And 3 years ago, my daughter accompanied me. They have an early start at JSerra before my daughter's school, so she flew with me to LAX, and we drove down to Orange County. And Pat Reedy, Vice President of Mission and Faith, interviewed Sarah on his podcast. And he said, so Sarah, I understand you're not on Instagram, you're not on TikTok, you never have been, you have no social media. Why is that? Is that because your father, Dr. Sachs here, will not allow it? And she said, no. It's because I have a life. I dance, I do theater, I go to the barn, I have friends. I have better things to do than scroll through Instagram and TikTok. And I'm very proud of how she handled that question. There is a link to that interview on the JSerra website. I've included that link in your handout if you'd like to hear my daughter, who is now 19, a freshman in the Honors College at the University of Pittsburgh, and she still has no social media, I'm very proud to say. But again, parents are skeptical. Whoops. So let's talk about John Haidt. Haidt claims that smartphones and social media are to blame for the increases in anxiety and depression that have been noted not only in the United States, but also in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. But Derek Thompson, writing in The Atlanta, notes that the rise in anxiety is not seen in many countries outside the English-speaking world. There's a link in your handout to his article in The Atlantic magazine where he says that America is exporting its culture. It's not seen in Spain. It's not seen in Greece. It's not seen in Russia. Over the same years that we were seeing this rise in anxiety and depression among American teens, we were not seeing it in Greece or Russia. But kids in Spain and Greece and Russia are just as likely to have phones, just as likely to be on social media as kids in the United States. These findings suggest that the smartphones and the social media are vectors, but not causal agents. Now, those term vectors and causal agents are borrowed from medicine. I'm a medical doctor. That's a photograph of the Anopheles mosquito. The Anopheles mosquito is the vector of malaria, but it's not the cause. The cause of malaria is the parasite, microorganism that you can only see under the microscope, Plasmodium falciparum. The mosquito is the vector, but the parasite is the cause. The smartphone, the social media are the vectors, but the causal agent is American culture, a newly toxic American culture. And that's why Greek and Russian kids are not affected. They're not exposed to the cause, to the toxic American culture. So I make this point in my article for the Institute for Family Studies. It's basically my rebuttal to John Haidt. John Haidt is mistaking the vector for the cause. He claims that the cause is smartphones and social media. No, smartphones and social media are the vector. The cause is a toxic American culture. And it matters. I agree with John Haidt. We've got to lock down the smartphones. We've got to eliminate social media for kids under 16 or 18. But we've got to do more than that. We've got to offer a healthier culture in place of the toxic contemporary culture of Drake and SZA and Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. Remember, John Haidt is an atheist who lives in Manhattan and loves it, loves American culture, loves Manhattan. There's a lot of things he does not see because of who he is. What do kids need in order to fulfill their potential? The French aristocrat wrote a letter to another aristocrat advising her how to raise her son. He said, "You must bring your young son up roughly and dangerously on a fractious horse against a tough opponent, sword in hand. Harden him to sweltering heat and to cold, to wind and sun, and to such dangers as he must learn to treat with contempt. He should experience hunger and exhaustion and loneliness. There is no other prescription." We tend to smile when we see such old-fashioned advice because we know better, don't we? Science has proven that trauma in childhood increases the risk of bad outcomes, right? But what is the evidence? What does a young person need? The contemporary cultural consensus is that any trauma in childhood and adolescence, whether physical or mental, increases the likelihood of bad outcomes. But is that true? Robert Yerkes, professor at Harvard, and his grad student John Dodson were the first to perform a quantitative study of the relationship between stress and performance. And their findings, variously referred to as the Yerkes-Dodson curve, the Yerkes-Dodson law, the Yerkes-Dodson relationship, is arguably among the most validated relationship in human psychology. It has been shown to be true. Well, the basic relationship is there's zero stress, not much performance. Moderate stress gives you optimal performance. Too much stress, poor performance. And this relationship is arguably among the most validated relationships in human psychology. It's been shown to be true in sports, from kindergarten through the professional leagues. It's true in commercial sales. It's true in military combat. It's true in academic test taking. And this is the basic idea. Nothing at stake, you don't get much performance. Something at stake, you get optimal performance. Too much at stake, somebody's got a gun to your head, you don't get good performance. Some parents today act as if it's our job as parents to protect our kids from all stress, trauma, and disappointment, and the end result is not stronger kids, but weaker kids. Parents today, American parents today, are more careful to protect kids from trauma of every kind, including unpleasant thoughts and feelings, in the belief that unpleasant thoughts and feelings are traumatic. One parent complained to the school that her daughter wasn't invited to a birthday party. She complained that her daughter was being bullied because she hadn't been invited to a birthday party. Mom believed that all the other kids were invited and her daughter wasn't invited. Mom was mistaken. About half the other kids were invited. So Donna Lindner was head of the lower school at the Agnes Irwin School when my daughter was a student there. And I attended a presentation that Donna did. Donna had a lot of wisdom to share. Donna said, when your kid comes home from school and she's upset, your kid is looking to you for guidance. Is this a big deal or not? So what should you do? And the details of this particular story, I think, are instructive. So the birthday girl had announced that her parents were going to host a huge party for her at Six Flags Great Adventure, and everybody was going to be invited. That's what the girl said. Now, she wasn't a close friend of this girl, but the girl said everybody was going to be invited, and she had announced the date. So this girl was planning on going to this party at Six Flags Great Adventure. But then when the invitations were sent out, this girl was not included. Everybody else was talking about how they got invited, and this girl was not invited. So she came home in tears. Everybody else got invited, and I didn't. What is best practice for you as a parent? I submit that best practice would be to say, okay, a week from Saturday, you're free. Hey, you know that new bike trail that's just opened up? You, me, let's go on the bike trail. No big deal, walk it off. Whether or not you got invited to a party from a girl that you don't even know is not a big deal. That is, I submit, best practice. But unfortunately, many parents listen to National Public Radio or read the New York Times, where they read an article that said you should validate your kid's feelings. And their kid comes home in tears, and they say, oh, that's terrible. You must feel so awful. Oh, honey. And now you both break into tears, burst into tears. You are teaching your kid to be fragile. You are teaching your kid to be fragile. You're teaching your kid that whether or not you get invited to a party is a really big deal. Don't do that. Well, what about that article in the New York Times that said you should validate your kids' feelings? It depends. If this girl has been your best friend for the last 8 years, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, she doesn't invite you to the party that everybody else got invited to, yeah, that would be a big deal. And I would be upset and concerned. But that's not the case here. She doesn't even know this girl. Walk it off. It's not a big deal. So I spoke at Shore Boys School in Sydney, Australia, and the previous headmaster would always bring parents into his office, parents of new boys, and he would always say to them, I do hope your son will be profoundly disappointed during his time at this school. And parents would say, why would you say such a thing? And he would say, if your son does not encounter real disappointment during his time at this school, he will not be prepared for it when he encounters it in his adult life, as he surely will. To be successful in life, you have to be willing to move from failure in one realm to failure in another realm with no loss of enthusiasm. That's the key. The rules for success in life are different from the rules for getting into a top college. Don't confuse the two. What's the opposite of fragile? Resilient has become kind of a mushy term. People use that term almost as a synonym for good. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean robust, meaning that you fail and you try the same thing. If at first you don't succeed, try again at the same thing. Or it can mean adaptive, meaning you fail and you try something different. So Nassim Taleb wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, where he says the opposite of fragile can mean robust, or it can mean something quite different. Anti-fragile, by which he means adaptive, trying something different. Anti-fragile, adaptive means you try something, you fail at it, so you try something different, and you fail at that, and you try something different yet again, and repeat. Success means moving from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm. And he gives examples mostly drawn from his world, which is the world of bond trading and investment banking. But as a family doctor, I think it applies very much to the world of parenting. That's the secret of true success. I recommend his book with some reservations. He's really into name dropping and showing you how many famous people he knows, but it is a useful book. Failure is not a tragedy. It's the key to success, or more precisely, the willingness to fail is the key to success. Never, ever, ever, ever tell anyone that your child is a straight A student, even if she is. Don't ever do that. Because if your child overhears you, you are setting her up for catastrophe. If she sees herself as a straight A student, then getting a B is a catastrophe. You are making her fragile, and you are making her risk averse. She won't want to take a course in which she isn't sure she'll get an A. Each semester she gets straight A's is just setting her up for failure. And if she hears you refer to her as a straight A student, she will be crushed when she brings home a B. Every time she hears you mention that, you're just increasing the magnitude and consequences of the collapse when it comes, and it will surely come. As one high school football coach said to me, there are two kinds of football players, those who are humble and those who soon will be. Anti-fragility means transforming fear into prudence, pain into information, mistakes into initiation, and desire into undertaking. Quoting from Nassim Taleb's book, and this is all in your handout. So Diana Baumrind, the great pioneer of parenting research, before Diana Baumrind, there were gurus of parenting, like Dr. Benjamin Spock, but they were mostly sharing anecdotes from their careers as pediatricians. Anecdotes are not data. Diana Baumrind pioneered the scientific study of parenting. She and her students went into homes and simply observed families, didn't offer recommendations or advice, just observed for many hours, over many visits, over many weeks. And then followed those kids for years, for decades. She identified and named the 4 parenting styles: the authoritarian parent who's whacking the kid, not loving; the permissive parent who may be very loving but is not enforcing the rules; the neglectful parent; and the authoritative parent who is both strict and loving. And then she's following these kids for decades, for 20, 30 years after those initial observations. And she finds that kids raised by authoritarian parents, the parent who's whacking the kid and not loving the kid, that those kids, when they grow up to be adults, are much more likely to be convicted of violent crimes, have great difficulty sustaining romantic relationships. They cannot give love because they never received love. Kids raised by the permissive, loving parent are much more likely as adults to be addicted to drugs or alcohol, much more likely to declare bankruptcy as adults, much more likely to struggle with anxiety and depression as adults. Kids raised by the authoritative parent, the parent who is both strict and loving, those kids have the best outcomes. They sustain romantic relationships, they get married and stay married, they thrive in the workplace, they are the least likely to have anxiety and depression. By the year 2000, she had more than 30 years of follow-up outcome studies from her longitudinal cohorts, and she had convinced everybody in the field. With more than 7,000 citations to some of her studies, everybody was convinced that authoritative parenting is clearly the best parenting, the parent who is both strict and loving, who inscribe their laws on the hearts of their children. But in the years before her death in 2018, she noted that there's been a shift in American parenting from authoritative to permissive. She expressed her concern that parents now in the mid-2010s, American parents think you have to choose. You have to either be a strict parent or a loving parent. She said that is mistaken, that is wrong. My research clearly shows that the best parents are both strict and loving. Not either or, but both and, both strict and loving. Not averse to seeing their kids subject to the right kind of stress. Well, what is the right kind of stress? We talked about the Yerkes-Dodson curve. What's the right kind of stress to help this kid become adaptive and anti-fragile? Well, it depends on the age of the kid. You want a situation where injury is possible but not likely to be life-threatening. For a 5-year-old, I would suggest a dog park. Take your kid to a dog park where your kid can play with other dogs. They might be injured. They might get a bite. They might sprain their ankle. They won't die. I have treated these injuries. It's not a big deal. You don't want your kid to be risk averse. You want your kid to be adventurous. Dog park. For teenagers, the summer job, not an elite academic program, not an internship. There's a link in your handout to this article by Katie Roif in the Wall Street Journal, in which she says teens need real jobs, not elite internships. Working that low-wage job, you'll learn how to respond to irrationality, to demanding or fickle desires, unfair criticism. That's a very useful skill to master. You'll meet people from different backgrounds, and you'll do boring work. At that low-wage summer job, your teen will learn real resilience from a manager who doesn't care about her feelings, or a grumpy customer who isn't interested in her inner life. This is very useful. You may think you're helping your child by arranging for the elite academic program or an internship. But without these kinds of experiences, kids become fragile. You will need courage. When one of your neighbors boasts about how her son got the prestigious summer internship at Goldman Sachs, and then your other neighbor boasts about how her daughter was accepted to the intensive summer academic program at Stanford, and they look at you, and you say, yeah, my son's going to be bussing tables for minimum wage at a greasy spoon at the beach. That will require courage. So I recommend Wendy Mogul's book, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And I want you to know I practice what I preach. My daughter was at the top of the jungle gym when she was 8 years old, about 9 feet off the ground, fell onto her outstretched right hand and broke her wrist. And here she is admiring the cast which I applied. You know, I'm a family doctor. Her mom brought her 8-year-old into the office, was running around the playground, tripped, fell, came into the office with a huge right ankle, and we have X-ray in our facility. And I said to Mom, okay, your daughter did indeed break her ankle. She'll need to follow up with the orthopedist. And Mom was furious. Said, we're not paying all this money for our daughter to get a broken ankle at the private school. And I said, look, if your daughter gets through elementary school and never breaks a bone or scrapes a knee, that is a deprived childhood. These are the experiences kids need to become strong. So when my daughter was 16, we talked about this program, and she wanted to do it. This is NOLS, National Outdoor Leadership School. 30 days in the Wind River Wilderness of Wyoming. That means 30 days at 11,000 feet with no toilet and no roof. And I would pay a lot of money not to go. But she wanted to do it. When you need to go poop, you dig a hole. Leave no trace. Sounds awful to me, but she didn't mind. There's my daughter carrying a 60-pound backpack, as well as the bear fence, because there are grizzly bears in the Wind River Wilderness of Wyoming. There is no Wi-Fi. There is no cell phone coverage. And they told us no news is good news. If something bad happens, you'll hear from us. It's not easy, because we're not used to having no contact with our kids. You're completely out of touch. You have no idea what's going on. Watching the Weather Channel to see a thunderstorm with 70-mile-an-hour winds going through the Wind River Wilderness. They have no protection against lightning. You're 11,000 feet. It's cold, and there's no heat. There is no heat. But she told me she saw the Milky Way like she's never seen it before. They have no detergent. You cleanse your spoon by licking it really well. The mountains of the Wind River Wilderness are granite, and her fingers got all torn up, but she didn't die. It made her stronger. So I'm a family doctor. Mom brings her 6-year-old into the office, explains she's sick, She's got a fever and sore throat. You can see she's sick. So after Mom tells me the story, I say, all right, time to take a look. Would you please open wide and say, ah? And her daughter shakes her head, no. I said, all right, Mom, looks like I'm going to need your help here. Would you please ask your daughter to open wide and say, ah? And Mom said, her body, her choice. Okay, my body, my choice, longtime slogan of abortion rights advocates, more recently adopted by advocates opposed to COVID vaccines. Mom is adopting that slogan to defend her daughter's refusal to allow me, the examining physician, to look at her throat. I chose that story to open the new edition of my book, The Collapse of Parenting. Because that's a real, people ask me, what do you mean by the collapse of parenting? Well, that's what I mean. That's a really good example. Look, human parenting only works if parents have authority. This mom seems to think it's virtuous to abandon her authority, to let her daughter decide. That's an extreme example. Over the last 20 years, there has been a transfer of authority from parents to kids. And I find that many parents now are reluctant to exercise authority. I talk to them about the importance of installing parental monitoring apps, and they don't want to. They want to be their kid's best friend. They are reluctant to exercise authority. They're uncomfortable exercising authority. 10 years ago, gentle parenting was not a thing. Now it is. That's one of many reasons we needed a new edition. Gentle parenting means you don't use the word no, you don't punish, you don't even toilet train. Gentle parenting means letting kids decide. There are no bad kids, according to gentle parenting gurus. 3 reasons kids don't need toilet training. The No Bad Kids Master Course. Okay, there are no bad kids, according to gentle parenting, just bad parents. So, gentle parenting is at odds with Scripture. B'Tselem Elohi bara oto. In the image of God, he created him. Yeah, we're all made in the image of God. But every student of Scripture also knows ki yetzer leva adam ra minu raiv. Because the desire, the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth. Genesis 6 and Genesis 8, before and after the flood doesn't change that. We're all made in the image of God, but we also have that evil impulse within us, right alongside. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, the line dividing good and evil does not run between nations, does not run between political parties. The line dividing good and evil runs through every human heart. We all are that mix of good and evil. Proverbs 16, Umoshel birucho milochai de'ira. Greater is he who can conquer his spirit than he who takes a city. You might recall that was Dwight Eisenhower's favorite line from Scripture. Lepetach chatat rovetz, ve'lecha teshukato va'ata timshel bo. Sin is crouching at the door, its desires for you, but you can govern, master it. Now notice that Hebrew root moshel, to govern, to master. The same Hebrew root is found again in Psalm 19. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Al yimashaluvi. Same Hebrew root right there. Moshel. That's the challenge. To recognize that we have that evil impulse within us. Gentle parenting doesn't get it. Gentle parenting traces its root to Rousseau, who said that men are born good and they're corrupted by society. That's not what Christianity says. Christianity recognizes that we all have that evil impulse within us, and we must govern, master it. Al yimshluvi. That's the challenge, to govern that evil impulse rather than to be governed by it, and to teach our children to do likewise. When I talk about the collapse of American parenting, I mean that many parents, instead of looking to Scripture or to the evidence, are instead looking to the New York Times or National Public Radio, where they find articles telling them to set their kid loose to decide for themselves their own right and wrong. And I cite that article in my book, The Collapse of Parenting. Don't listen to the New York Times. Don't listen to National Public Radio. Look to the research, to Diana Baumrind, who says you must inscribe your law in the hearts of your kids. And I also wanted to mention Deuteronomy 6. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. That next phrase usually translated, teach them diligently to your children. But that's not what the Hebrew says. It would be easy to say that in biblical Hebrew. The verb would be lamed, but the verb there is not lamed. The verb is shanein. Shanein doesn't mean to teach. It means to chisel in stone. From the root shane, meaning tooth. So a better translation of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7 would be something like, inscribe, incise, chisel these laws in the hearts of your children. You'll find that exegesis of Deuteronomy 6 in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, right alongside the New York Times article by Jennifer Finney Boylan, in which she said that enlightened parenting means setting your kid loose to discover for themselves their own right and wrong. And if in so doing your child becomes a stranger to you, then so be it. Don't listen to the New York Times. Listen to Diana Baumrind or listen to Scripture. So when I meet with students, I will often ask them, what's school for? High school students, I ask them, what's school for? Why go to school? They'll say, to get into a good college. I'll say, why do you have to go to a good college? They'll say, to get a good job. I'll say, why do you need a good job? They'll say, to earn money, to earn a lot of money. I'll say, why do you need to earn a lot of money? They'll say, to have fun. Geez, who hired this guy? So, Dr. Wright hired me to spend 2 days at Shore, the boys' school in Sydney, Australia. And of course, we'd worked out the agenda in advance. A big part of the agenda was meeting with students, grade by grade, to do these back and forth questions. So he picked me up at the airport, and driving in, he said, I want you to ask me the questions you're going to ask the students tomorrow. I said, all right, here's one. What is school for? And he said, school is preparation for life. It's not about getting into university. School is preparation for life. And I answered him as I would answer a student. I said, all right, what is human life for? And he answered without hesitation. He said, human life is for 3 things. Meaning for work, a person to love, and a cause to embrace. I said, okay. That is an answer. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm not saying you have to embrace Dr. Wright's answer. But that's an answer. That's what an answer feels like. You've got to figure out what is your answer. You've got to offer your answer to your kid. So remember the Yerkes-Dodson curve. Find the right kind of stress to go beyond resilience. Recognize that the willingness to fail is the key to success. Don't sink into the culture of safetyism. Remember the blessing of a skinned knee. Be the authoritative parent. We began this evening with a question: why are American kids today so much more likely to be anxious, depressed, fragile, and what can we do to make a difference? My answers are that the parents have allowed the American culture of disrespect to break bonds across generations. But you can change that. Prioritize the family, block out that culture of disrespect, offer a healthier culture. American culture now prioritizes fame over virtue and character. You must challenge that. You can't change Hollywood, but you can offer a healthier culture in your home. Parents have allowed social media and video games to displace real-world experience. Well, you can change that. You must limit, govern, and guide video games, and you got to lock down social media, I would argue, for any child under 18. The collapse of American parenting has set kids adrift in a toxic culture that celebrates instant gratification, the desire of the moment, and live for now. You must challenge that. You must offer a positive culture in which it's cool to be virtuous and self-controlled. But you cannot teach a virtue which you yourself do not possess. In order to become a better parent, you'll have to become a better person. So you find more on these topics in my 4 books, all of which are available as audiobooks. My books are available in translation in 12 different languages, some of which are shown here and a few of which are on the counter here. If you found this message useful and you know of another group that might be interested, I hope you'll come up, grab a business card, let me know. I hope you'll sign up for my free newsletter at leonardsachs.com. I will never share your email with anybody. I send out a newsletter about once a month. Hope you'll check out my website. I offer a lot of other presentations. This presentation is a bit of a downer, I think you'd have to admit. Not very much fun. Hopefully useful, but not a lot of laughs. My most fun presentation is titled Why Gender Matters, What Parents Need to Know About Hardwired Girl-Boy Differences. Turns out that for many odors, women have a sense of smell that's much better than a man's. How much better? 5 times better? 10 times better? No, it's 100,000 times more sensitive. A man and woman walk into a room, and the woman says, oh my goodness, something's rotten in here, I'm going to throw up. And the man says, I don't smell anything. So that's a very fun presentation. The handout for this talk is my name, leonardsachs.com/trinity.pdf. It is case sensitive. It is all lowercase, and you must include the .pdf. So now it's your turn. Your comments, questions, or stories you'd like to share, raise your hand, and I will call on you. Yes?
Here you go. Oh, sorry. Oh, what? Sure. With social media being more toxic within the United States, this is more of a, my kids aren't on social media or anything, but if the same product is available in multiple locations, is the a two-part question. Is the cultural product, the algorithm reinforcing the culture? And is that also effective one of the largest free markets to make money on, combined with 50% of the internet traffic is bots, possibly from Russia and China? So is there an intentional aggregate usage of foreign nations to cause problems in our society, which I believe is real? I work for the government, I know it's real. Or is it just, like, what is it a reflection of itself, or is it causing something?
Okay, so let me restate the question. Kids in Greece and Russia have social media, but they're not exposed to American popular culture. It's American popular culture that's driving the anxiety and depression, not the social media. Some people might say that this is a deliberate plot by Russia and China. I don't buy that. American popular culture is toxic not because Russia and China have made it so, but because of factors intrinsic to American culture, which I explore at great length in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, which I hope you'll take a look at. Next comment, next question. Yes? No, the first edition was written 20 years ago. The second edition is more recent.
So in that time, has there been any discovery of, has there been any consensus around the issues of feminization, hormones, the questions that you raised in 2007 about why girls are entering precocious puberty earlier, why boys are seeing decrease in male sexual traits?
Sure.
What do you think, and is that the same or different from what the scientific consensus is?
Okay, so in my book, Boys Adrift, the subtitle is The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men. One of those factors is endocrine disruptors. And male hormone levels are dropping and continue to drop. A young man's testosterone level today is about half what a young man's testosterone level was 50 years ago. And that's a problem because young men depend on testosterone for drive and motivation. Girls and women do not. When researchers look to see hormone levels of highly motivated, ambitious women and compare them with less motivated, less ambitious women, there are no differences. Women don't rely on hormones, on any hormone, for drive and ambition, but men do. When you look at the hormone levels of ambitious, highly motivated, hardworking men, you find they have much higher testosterone levels than lazy, unmotivated men. When testosterone levels drop, motivation drops. Why is it dropping? It's dropping because of endocrine disruptors, and this is widely agreed on in the scientific community. This is a consensus in the scientific community, which I think I document pretty well in the second edition. Where is it coming from? It's coming from this. This bottle is made of polyethylene terephthalate. It sat in a truck in direct sunlight. The temperature inside that truck exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you get above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, diethyl hexyl phthalate begins to leak into the contents of this container. DEHP, diethyl hexyl phthalate, acts in your body like a female hormone. As a result, girls are going to go through puberty earlier, and boys are going to see their testosterone levels drop. And not just this bottle. We're also talking about condiments, pasta sauce, soda, Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, anything that comes in a plastic bottle is now, it used to be sold in, used to buy pasta sauce in glass 20, 30 years ago. Now it's in plastic. And as a result, your kids are consuming female hormones. As a result, girls are going through puberty earlier. Earlier onset of puberty is known to be a major risk factor for anxiety and depression in teenagers, as I document in my book, Girls on the Edge. This is very easy to prevent. Don't buy this. Don't ever drink water from a plastic bottle.
I told Mrs. Catter not to give that to you. Give me that. Give me that.
Instead, pour tap water into a steel canteen, which is what I do. It's better for the environment, it's cheaper, it's safer. So yeah, there's pretty good consensus in the scientific community, and there's pretty good awareness in California, which is exceptional in the United States. In most of the United States, people aren't really interested in this, but in California they are. And it's not hard. I mean, it's a few pennies more expensive to buy your pasta sauce in a glass bottle than in a plastic bottle. But it's not that much more expensive, and I think it's well worth it. Or make your own. It's not that hard.
Right.
Next question.
Dr. Sachs, in your book, Boys Adrift, you advocate for boys only and girls only schools.
Not in the second edition. You're looking at the first edition, 2007.
So then maybe you can tell us the new 5th edition, extra 6 factor, that's secret.
Okay, that 6 factor, okay. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm happy to do that. Let's go ahead and pull up those slides, because it doesn't work well without the slides. So I got to go back to the computer and just pull up the slides for the 6 factor, but I can keep talking. So yeah, the publishers asked for a new edition, because the first edition was 2007, second edition 2016, third edition is in the pipeline. The subtitle of Boys Adrift is the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. For the new edition, we're going to cross out the word 5 and write in the word 6. And I just did this talk in Nashville, looking for the word Overbrook. I just saw it. There it is. Just did this talk 2 days ago. All right. So for the new edition, we're going to cross out the word 5 and write in the word 6. And this is a rough draft of the cover. The 6 factor has 3 components: pornography, AI girlfriends, and the manosphere. Pornography is ancient, but the new pornography is much more toxic, much more violent, promotes false understanding with regard to choking, anal sex, and violence. 2/3 of college women now report being choked during sex. Next week, I'll be meeting with students in Indiana. For that meeting, we're going to separate the boys and girls. We're going to meet with them separately. We're going to talk to girls about social media. We're going to talk to boys about pornography. And I'm going to let the boys know that girls don't like to be choked. And the boys don't believe it because they've been watching porn since they were 12 years old, where the girls love to be choked. And I'll say to them, no, they don't. Yeah, they do. No, they don't. You're watching porn in which actresses pretend to like it, but they don't like it. This is the study from Debbie Herbenek, published this year, showing that 2/3 of women now report being choked during sex. Sexual choking now so common, the man doesn't think he needs to ask. More than 1/3 of women now report engaging in anal sex. I explain to the boys, girls don't like this. And yeah, they do, they love it. No, they don't. Look, at public schools and at secular independent schools, the health teacher has 3 objectives in health class: to talk about sexually transmitted disease, prevention of pregnancy, and consent. And many health teachers encourage boys to masturbate over pornography. This checks all 3 boxes. No concern about consent, no concern about sexually transmitted disease, no concern about sexually transmitted disease, pregnancy, or consent. And the health teacher is not explaining the false information, the lies that pornography. Researchers find that boys who watch violent porn are 10 times more likely to engage in violent sex with a female partner. Youth Risk Behavior Survey recently did a large survey of high school kids across the United States. 38% of high school girls now say that they are not straight, an astonishingly high number for a question that wasn't even in the previous survey. I don't think these girls are running away from something. I think these girls are not running towards something, they're running away from something. They're sick of the choking, the anal sex, the lack of respect. Scholars have coined a new term, heteropessimism, to refer to women's regret, embarrassment, or hopelessness about relationships with men. The Pew Research Survey recently surveyed young women 18 to 30 years of age and asked them, how many of you are looking for any kind of relationship with a man? Maybe a serious relationship, maybe a casual date? Only 34% of women said yes. 66% of women are not interested. They've given up. We are failing as a society of raising boys to be gentlemen. We're allowing boys to look at porn. Okay, I'm not going to go through all these slides. We don't really have time for this, but I just want to mention one Christian school that did something very courageous, a boys' school. They surveyed all their parents, and they asked them, how often does this is a high school, boys' high school, how often does your son look at porn? Never, once a month, more than once a month, once a week, more than once a week, or every day? More than 90% of the parents said never. Then they surveyed the boys. How often do you look at porn? Never, once a month, more than once a month, once a week, more than once a week, every day. More than 90% of the boys said more than once a week or every day. And they shared that information with the parents. And that was very courageous, because the danger is that the parents might say, all the boys at this school are perverts. I'm going to transfer my son to another school. But they would have gotten the same results at any school. Where are the boys looking at the porn? On their phones. What proportion of the parents have installed any kind of parental monitoring software to limit what boys can see on their phone? 4%. Parents are clueless. Parents have no idea what their boys are doing. Parents are out of touch and incompetent. That's what the research is showing. Don't be that parent. You can do better. You must install parental monitoring software. It is a toxic world. The porn is really harmful and is a major factor contributing to the collapse of I gotta see if I can just show you the data on nope, I don't have it here. There's been a collapse in the marriage rate across the United States. And it continues to collapse. And not just marriage, but coupling. When you include people living together without benefits of marriage, that's collapsing too. Young women increasingly are looking at men and saying, no, I'm not interested. We are failing as a society to raise men that women want to be with. And this is a big part of it. So anyhow, we don't have time for that full part, or AI girlfriends of the manosphere, but there's a lot more.
I want to do one more question. Let's do an upper question. Let's leave on a high note.
Dr. Sachs, I have a question more about you personally. What made you want to switch from practicing medicine to really focusing on the parenting?
Well, I still practice medicine. But when you see something going on and you think you have something to say about it, you want to get the message out. And you don't find other people saying what needs to be said. I have a unique perspective as a family doctor, and I get very frustrated with ivory tower people like John Haidt in their university setting who clearly are not clinical. They don't, in a fundamental way, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't have that firsthand encounter with the teenage boy. Right now, I'm talking a lot with Richard Reeves, who I have a lot of respect for. He wrote the book of Boys and Men, and he invited me to a private workshop at the University of Pennsylvania. He's invited me to be part of a scholarly journal that he and his colleagues are putting out. He's invited me to submit an article. And we really went 12 rounds because he is a policymaker, many years at the Brookings Institution. And there are a lot of things he just doesn't see. He knows the data and he knows the studies, but he's never counseled a boy who's struggling with pornography. He's never done that. So I think I have a unique perspective and I want to share it. So that's what. Okay. How do you counsel a boy who's struggling with pornography? How do you counsel any addict who wants to be cured? Addiction means loss of control. And if that boy's a Christian, and many boys who come to me are, because they know I'm a Christian, we go back and forth. We'll go with the data and talk about 12 steps. I always go from a 12 steps format, okay? The 12 steps means I am powerless over my addiction. But I believe that God can deliver me. You, God, can deliver me. A higher power can deliver me. And I submit myself to you. And then we'll talk about Galatians 6. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. If a man sows to please the flesh, from the flesh he will reap destruction. If a man sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit he will reap eternal life. We talk about James chapter 1 and the dipsychos, the double-minded man. Because part of him wants to be healed, but part of him doesn't. Part of him really enjoys pornography. And I say, I get that. It's true of every addict. It's true of every addict. It's true of the alcoholic. It's true of the heroin addict. That's why you're an addict. Because you enjoy it. I get that. I understand that. And James understood that. He says the dipsychos is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. You don't want to be like that. You've got to put that part of yourself to death. It's not easy. It is not easy. It is not easy. So there's a lot to say, and this is not, we don't have the time to go into all of it, but a 12 steps approach is the short answer.
Can we thank Dr. Sachs? That was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Sachs. Thank you. We have something for you. So I'm thinking we need to have Dr. Sachs return. Yes, very good. Yes, we will look to do that. And just wanted to thank you, Dr. Sachs, with a small token of appreciation. For those of you that have been in our community, we speak a lot about our cultural values and the things that we hope to strive for in ourselves as faculty and staff, but then will get passed on to our students. And they are peacemaking, honest humility, habitual excellence, intentional relationships, and kingdom service. And we have physical representations of those that we like to talk about. So we have a box of See's candy, because that is excellent if you're going to have a piece of chocolate, which I don't think you have back east. Yes, so this is good stuff. We have a Starbucks card to grab a cup of coffee or tea representing intentional relationships. And we actually have a little Trinity swag for you.
Very good.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sachs. Thank you all for being with us this evening. We did record tonight, so we will be able to get that to our parents who couldn't be here, but also if you want to catch some of it again. And I'm just going to pray for you. Heavenly Father, we just thank you and praise you, Lord. We thank you for this evening and Dr. Sachs, his presentation, his graciousness to spend the day with us and speak life into the things as parents that we can be looking at and continue to grow in courage in when it comes to our children, Lord, and how we can help them grow to be men and women of virtue, wisdom, purpose, and courage, Lord. And we just thank you and praise you and bless his travels. I know he heads to Colorado tomorrow to do this all over again at another classical school. So we just pray your travel mercies upon him and his health. Amen. Amen. Thank you, folks.